Hey guys, Atlantis Acolyte here. So, yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? I hope you're all doing well amidst the current global circumstances that have plagued this world since the beginning of last year. And that being said, I hope you're all doing well, despite possibly experiencing some setbacks as well as tragedy. But I digress. Anyway, what I wanted to get to, well, when I first created my channel, I kind of emphasized how I wanted to tell stories. But, oddly enough, my channel has kind of deviated away from that. So, here I am, right back on the very futon where my channel began, where I made my first video. And I figured, why don't I just do that? Just tell you a story. And that kind of ties into why I'm making this video, because I got a pretty big announcement. Yep, I've published my first book. The book is entitled Aera-Kerr, Prelude of Fate, and it's going to be the first installment of a young adult fantasy saga. So, yeah, I'm gonna kind of give you guys a quick rundown of the story and just see what you all think. So, without further ado, I'm gonna kind of pitch the story to you guys and see what you think of it. Now, thousands of years ago, mankind learned how to use various forms of mystical and metaphysical energies, which have been long since forgotten in the modern era. And this consisted of magic, which in this universe is called mana, and alchemy. Now, these were used extensively by nations and societies that practiced them, but they also existed in the primordial fabric of the cosmos, in basically crystalline structures, like crystals basically, I should say. Now, these crystals were prominently harvested from the continent of Atlantis, which, as I'm sure many of you know, is a mythical island that was in the mid-Atlantic and supposedly sank beneath the ocean due to a cataclysm. And that does tie into the mythos of my story, but I kind of modified it in such a way that, Atlantis wasn't like a sea-themed or like a Roman-themed city like it's commonly depicted, because, that's dumb. That's how Atlantis is always depicted. No. I wanted for Atlantis, in the scope of Aera-Kerr, to be kind of like a civilization that was like a couple millennia ahead of their time. Like highly sophisticated architecture, advanced mystical technologies, advanced medicine, and even the ability to develop flying vehicles. So, and the crystal thing kind of ties into some ancient mythos, or not so ancient, but recent mythos posited by another storyteller, or a philosopher, I forget which it was, and I'm sure many of you know from Disney's Atlantis, the Lost Empire, centered around crystals, but I decided to take it a step further than that, where there are numerous crystals that represent the ancient elements of the cosmos: earth, fire, water, wind, light, dark, etc. Each of which actually corresponds to a certain dimension within the cosmos, each universe. Yeah, so our dimension, the one we inhabit and our world is in, is the light dimension. And humans are the master race of light, because we're the dominant species of this planet. And other dimensions have their own master race as well, which are sapient and able to communicate on a level on par with humans. But you won't get to see them until the later installments, of course. So, back to Atlantis. There was one particular figure who was part of the royal family, and he was High Prince Zane Azrael. So, Azrael was the last High Prince of Atlantis, who was next in line to the throne as Emperor. But Atlantis, unfortunately, succumbed to the catastrophe that caused it to sink before that could happen. So, what makes him so special? Well, let's just say he's really gifted with numerous forms of mana and metaphysical energies. He wasn't like any mana priests at the time who could study arcane forms of magic and just do really advanced stuff with it. No, he's different. Basically, when his soul was conceived, the 7 divine gods, each of whom reign over their own dimension, imbued his soul with their essence. So, in all essence, like, when Azrael was conceived, he basically just got, like, boom, huge power boost right from the divine gods. And his soul is, like, just blinding compared to others. Why is this important? Well, in the dark dimension, there's a demigod, whose name is Xeraor. Now, Xeraor has also really been interested in learning about, like, the deep lore surrounding mana. Where it originated, why the divine gods are, like, the ultimate wielders of it. And he kind of wanted to learn how to use it to create his own world that he could reign over, so that he wouldn't have to keep listening to his master, divine god Umbrax, the divine god of darkness. So, Xeraor used, like, a really sophisticated form of mana to create his own world. But that didn't really bode too well with divine god Umbrax. And Xeraor, who had become pretty drunk on power based on, like, all the really crazy and insane stuff he could do with mana, he ultimately ended up defying Umbrax. He's like, hey, this is my world, and guess what? I'm taking yours next, and all others. So yeah, this guy basically viewed the divine gods and all life, both mortal and immortal, to be a threat to this little perfect world he created. Now, this is where Azrael comes into the picture, because he's super powerful, and he uses the energy of a really powerful crystal known as the Prominence Crystal, which is, like, way more powerful than any other crystal in existence. And he uses it to counter Xeraor's power, along with wielding a really powerful mystical weapon. So it's like, yeah, it's just like upgrade after upgrade, like God mode in a video game, so to speak. But yeah, he goes to combat Xeraor as a way to, like, stopping him from, like, terrorizing the other dimensions, because he was, like, sending numerous demon creatures to attack. And he ultimately ended up defeating Xeraor after Atlantis had already succumbed to its fate, because the divine gods had to intervene and kind of close off the portal by submerging the entire island. So Xeraor was defeated. Azrael and his people of Atlantis had to kind of seek new refuge in Europe, and some of them even went as far as to travel to the Far East. So now, fast forward 2 millennia to the near future, halfway through the 21st century, where the story officially begins. Yeah, that was all just the prologue. But anyway, we cut to our main character, Tyrell Wolf. And, you know, he's, like, doing some stuff in his spare time. He's practicing with, like, a bullwhip, swinging it around. Just going about, like, some day-to-day life, as any adolescent would. He's a high schooler, by the way, who just got out of school for the summer, and after he gets back from one of his little practice sessions, he receives an email in his primary inbox, which is something that's very rare to him, and he sees that it's from a girl he has a crush on, Kira Birkin, and this takes him by surprise. It's like, whoa, why is she emailing me? And it turns out it's a birthday invitation. So, here's the thing. Tyrell hardly knows Kira, right? And it's, like, really out of the blue, and it's really awkward for him to receive this message. But the reason why is explained in, like, a PS at the bottom, where she, like, knocked his, like, books and stuff out of his hand when he was cleaning out his locker at school, when they were all leaving after final exams. So, yeah, he finds it a bit strange that she would want to make up for something, like, really minor, but the thing is, Kira is, like, a really, like, kind and caring individual who would want to go above and beyond to make up for any mistake. That's kind of how I am, I'll be honest, at times, but anyway, he decides that this is a good opportunity to finally see if he can win Kira over, but he realizes it won't be easy because she already has a boyfriend. His name is Drake. So Tyrell realizes that he is gonna need to figure out a way that he can make himself stand out in such a way that would make him seem favorable to Kira over Drake. And he figures that, a nice gift might make a good first impression, and hopefully getting to know her at our party might also do some good. So he starts kind of trying to think about how he's gonna go about this, and before he's really able to delve into it, one night when he goes to sleep, he has a nightmare pertaining to Kira. And what it is he sees this demonic figure, which may or may not have been alluded to in the prologue. And he also sees a small glowing cyan crystal. And what happens is Kira is in his dream, but her back is facing him, and when he reaches toward her, the crystal appears in his hand along with a bright flash. And the next thing you know, Kira turns around to face him, and she seems really deformed, almost like she's been cursed or rotted in a way. So the crystal emits an energy beam at her, which seems to kill her. And then Tyrell, in shock, withdraws his hand, and the crystal in front of him falls to the floor. So, it's a nightmare. He doesn't know he's sleeping, and it's all kind of freaking him out. And so he runs to try and escape, and he wakes up. Oh, it was just a dream. Phew. Well, what he doesn't know at the time is, better hope that dream may or may not be prophetic. Hint, hint. So anyway, yeah, he decides to go on a walk with his dog to kind of brainstorm, what am I gonna get for her? What is she like? Maybe I could use some clues from school, since I shared a class with her. And as he's walking, his dog wades into a nearby brook. And when he orders his dog to kind of step out of the brook, she happens to kind of step over something in the water that's emitting a faint light. And he reaches down and picks it up. And what do you know? It's the crystal that he saw in his dream. Yeah, it's the exact same glowing cyan crystal. So he's just all what the hell? Why is this real? Why is it here? And as he's carefully examining it, his focus is more drawn in towards it, while everything around him kind of fades away. It's like he's drawn into a trance by the crystal, which he sort of is, actually. And he continues to just be totally entranced until the dog barks at him to keep going, which snaps him back to reality. He's like, whoa, where am I? Because it feels like he's been away for hours on end. So anyway, he decides to go into town to see if he can get a good gift for Kira. And he realized that from back in school, she liked to read a lot. Mainly Shakespearean work. Yeah, she's one of those unusual people who actually reads Shakespeare at this time in the century. But yeah, so as he's trying to make his selection, something seems to be subconsciously guiding him onto a particular story. 12th Night, if you want to know. So he continues to try to browse past it and see what other options there are, but something is just continually trying to draw his focus toward this particular book. And so he goes, screw it, I'm just gonna trust this gut feeling I have and get it. So he gets it, and he decides to ride his bike back to the apartment. But as he's riding, suddenly a lamppost starts rattling with red electrical sparks. And he, of course, stops to take a look at it. It's whoa, what's going on here? And he sees a strange rune in the light fixture for a brief moment before it explodes. Glass goes everywhere, and the lamppost starts to tip in his direction. So he, of course, pulls his bike out of the way, and right before the lamppost hits the ground, bam! So he escapes safely, but it draws the attention of a crowd who try to begin questioning him, but he slips away, riding fast on his bike. And for some reason, despite how hard he's pedaling, he doesn't seem to get tired, as he usually would. So yeah, something drawing his focus onto a particular book and something preventing him from getting tired. I wonder what that might be. So, yeah. Anyway, later on, he decides to enlist the help of a female friend to kind of like aid him at Kira's birthday party. But as he's making his way toward her house, the crystal that he found earlier begins to like glow brighter and begin to hum. It's reacting to something. So he like takes a brief look around like, whoa, what's going on here? And he realizes he's passing by like a small stream with a small waterfall nearby. And as he leaves the area, the crystal like returns to its neutral state. It stops humming and glows dimmer, back to its normal brightness. So he gets the help of the female friend having to, offer a bit of compensation, since she's initially like, what the hell, man, you scumbag. But, yeah, ultimately she agrees to help him, and he's like, okay, great, glad you could help. So, of course, he decides to head back to the apartment, and of course he's just, like, overthinking this whole thing, like, well, what if this goes wrong? What if she doesn't like this book? What if, my female friend doesn't, actually help me? What if she's setting me up? Like, he's starting to become really anxiety-ridden because, I intend for him to be like a protagonist who's very, like, unlucky toward women, so to speak. Like, he's been rejected by numerous girls and he has no idea how to do this, so he's wondering, what's right, what's wrong? I don't know. But he figured, I'm just gonna have to take a shot and see where it gets me. So, the following day, he remembers that spot in the woods where the crystal was reacting, right next to, like, a small waterfall with a stream. And he decides, I need to see what that was all about. So he goes back to that one spot with the, like, waterfall, and sure enough, the crystal is reacting again. So he starts looking around in, like, a small eroded area behind the waterfall, since that's a particular area of interest to him, and he sees another light behind a pile of rocks. So he starts, like, hauling the rocks out of the way, tossing them aside, shifting them sometimes because they're so big, and what he sees is like a glowing rune in the wall, and directly below it is a slot, like a hole in the wall. So he realizes that it's in a very familiar shape, the hole, and looking at the crystal he realizes that they're the exact same shape. As for the rune, well, it's basically the same rune that I have for my profile picture for my channel. Yeah, it's basically going to be the series logo. So, he puts the crystal into the hole in the wall, and suddenly a glowing ring of light expands into a doorway. It's basically a portal in the wall. So then he takes the crystal out, he goes into the portal, and sure enough, there's another, like, rune with a hole directly beneath it in this new wall, in a tunnel that goes straight towards what appears to be a light source. So, yeah, this is where the fantasy really starts to come into play here. He's just kind of being, like, eased into it all the way. So he makes his way down the tunnel, and what he sees next just stops him dead in his tracks, eyes wide, jaw to the floor. Inside this, like, cave chamber is a whole enclosed ecosystem consisting of things like, not just, like, rocks and boulders, but also, like, plant life. There's grass, there's bushes, there's trees, and the whole room is illuminated by these strange, multicolored, glowing crystals. And there's even, like, a small pond in the cave, too, and some, like, small streams where water's flowing. So, yeah, I imagine this would probably take anyone by surprise if they came across this. It's just like, whoa, what is this place? So he starts to kind of explore and seeing what the various crystal types are, depending on their color, and he notices one particular type, kind of changes to a dark blue when he touches it. It's like a gold crystal. And you'll figure out why when you read the story. So anyway, the protagonist, Tyrell, yeah, as he ventures around in the chamber, he eventually comes across a stone pedestal surrounded by four glowing four torches with blue flames. And what's on top of the pedestal but a bullwhip? Now that's a rather odd detail, isn't it? Because he was actually spending time practicing with a whip at the beginning of the story. It's just become kind of his, favorite hobby. So he's like, what kind of coincidence is this that there would be a whip in this cave? And he notices that it's really ornate, made of like a silvery leather, and the handle is like made of a glass and shaped in like a baseball bat with a pommel and tapering upward onto the shaft of the whip. So at first he assumes that like the pedestal is rigged with a Indiana Jones style trap. So he picks up like a shard of dislodged gold crystal, which turns blue as he touches it for some odd reason. And right as he sets it on the pedestal to try to weigh it down in case it's rigged, which it's not, the whip actually begins to change as a result of reacting to the crystal. Excuse me. And yeah, the whip changes to where like the thick silver plating becomes a thinner black plating, and the handle becomes more plain with the same herringbone plat as the shaft. But yeah, at the transition point from the handle to the shaft and on the pommel are two like silver cylinders. So yeah, the whip kind of changes into a more simple style, but is actually one that he sort of prefers, since he has very like simple, minimal taste. So he decides to like take this strange whip. He swings it around, gets a good feel for it, and for some reason he feels like he's wielded it before. He can't quite put his finger on it, even though he's like never seen it before, but at the same time he feels like he has. And then he notices a plaque attached, like embedded into the stone of the pedestal. And written in Latin characters is like a name. Zane Azrael. So, yeah, again, when he says it out loud, it again sounds like a name that he's heard before, but he's never met anyone by that name. And this is all like too much for him to take in at once, so he really has to like just go home and like clear his head. He's like, whoa, I am so confused right now. I find a glowing crystal. Suddenly some subconscious force is like guiding me to make decisions. I'm able to exert myself really hard without getting tired. I find that I'm more confident in certain situations. The crystal leads me to like this weird cave. What is going on here? But this is only the beginning. Later that night, he goes to sleep, and he hears a voice. Like, he doesn't dream or anything like that. Like, this is all just like a pitch black void and just a disembodied voice telling him, like, you have found this crystal and this whip, and both are really important. And the voice then goes on to kind of explain, like, the perils that exist in the other dimensions and how they could cross over into our dimension. And the voice explains Tyrell's role in all of this, how he has to be the one to repel these evil forces, how mankind is at the precipice of eradication, and ultimately how Tyrell is basically the only hope not only for their universe but the cosmos. And when Tyrell awakens, he only has very vague recollections of what was said, because it was all just kind of a dream to him, so to speak, but it wasn't. He only has very vague memories and only remembers the really specific parts, but not the really other secondary stuff. And yeah, that's basically Act 1 I'm not going to spoil anything further in case any of you do want to read the story after hearing this. But yeah, I feel that this leaves a lot of, possibility of where the story could go. Like, will Tyrell impress this girl he wants to eventually go out with? Will he get into a conflict with her pre-existing boyfriend? Who was that voice that spoke to him? Why does he have, like, a whip and a crystal? Why did he discover a cave in this area he's called home that nobody else has? Yeah, like, how does Atlantis fit into all this? Do these threats pertain to Xeraor? Is Azrael involved in all this, And a lot of these questions will be answered in the first story, but most of them actually won't be answered until some of the later installments that I've planned, and two of which I've actually began working on. The manuscript for the second one is complete, but third one is in progress, and I still have to edit the manuscript for the second one and get some beta readers for it. So, yeah, that was basically my pitch. I hope you all kind of enjoyed it. So where do I plan to go from here? Well, I've officially kind of started my own indie publisher, Lucember Print Distributions. And yeah, I'm kind of hoping to kind of begin my career as an indie author. That being said, I'm just starting off, so I've got a long way to go, I imagine. Granted, the internet has simplified a lot of things, but it's still not going to be easy, I imagine, trying to make myself a well-known name. But I got to at least try, right? That's the American dream. And especially during a time like this, where the economy is so dire, and I'm going to need to figure out a way to generate a second stream of income in addition to my day job. And if all goes well, maybe one day I could surpass it and make this into my full-time job, because I got a bunch of other stories besides this one, and in fact, besides the saga that I want to tell, yeah, there are other, like, book series. In fact, I've got ideas for, like, a couple of trilogies, and I guess one of the interesting things about the books I'm writing is that all the series that I'm writing may or may not exist within the same, like, universe, so to speak. Even though they may not seem related at first, but that's beside the point. Anyway, I think my main barriers to entry are money and time. Money-wise, I've pretty much had to fund this entire setup on my own, obtaining a trade name, purchasing ISBNs, going through the general setup process of self-publishing, getting cover art, etc. And it hasn't exactly been cheap, so I'm hoping I can eventually get some good royalties coming in. And the second is time. So I'm sure many of you know that money can't really buy time, and book writing is very time-consuming, as well as editing, getting beta readers, publishing, etc. However, if I'm able to generate some more revenue, then I can allocate more time towards my writing. Given that I am fairly new to the scene, however, I imagine I'm pretty largely cut off from the funding of any third-party organizations, particularly with grants and stuff, since I imagine those are only given out to, like, really elite writers. But yeah, I think what I'm going to try to do is, spawn some interest, see if I can generate royalties in my future installments, since the first book is kind of as cheap as I can get it. Paperback version is $9 American, and the ebook version is $1. I really wish I could have made the ebook free of charge, I really do, just to spawn interest, but I unfortunately wasn't able to do that through the distributor platforms I'm using. And I'm still a little sketchy about KDP Select, since I don't really know if that would involve, like, forfeiting, rights to my saga, or in general. And I think I might also start a Patreon, which, I'm not, like, trying to demand money or anything like that, but, anything that any of you could spare once I get the Patreon up and running, it would really help, like, even anything like $1, $3, $5. I imagine with enough people it could really add up, and with that I could allocate more time towards, penning my works and getting them out there for people to read and enjoy, and hopefully I can inspire people with some of the interesting messages and technological ideas I have in my books. But yeah, I know what I'm doing is a long shot by so many means. Like, there's so much going against me. I'm basically an insect entering into a world of titans. But who knows? Maybe it could all work out, and my career as a storyteller could one day really hit the scene. Then, maybe might even be the matter of film adaptations, which that's probably like a whole separate part of work, which might involve having to hire lawyers and agents and whatnot to sort it all out for me, if it ever comes to that. Maybe even video game adaptations, which that'd be pretty cool. Or TV adaptations, which, I could see the Aera-Kerr saga being adapted into like a manga or anime series. I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, I basically just decided to do what I do best, which is, to tell you all a story and just kind of see if it spawns interest. So, I hope this video was fascinating for you all, and, I wish you all well in recovering financially, emotionally, and physically during these unprecedented times, which I'm not really sure if COVID-19 is going to play a role in the stories I'm writing, but who knows. Anyway, thanks for coming back to me at square one, right here on the same futon where my channel began, and I look forward to seeing what you guys think of the pitch I made. Have a good day, everyone.